The Third Eye by Tuesday Labsang Rampa. Read to you by BlueFriend. Chapter 17. Final Initiation. After, at various lamassaries, I had seen the embalming some half-dozen times, I was one day sent for by the abbot in charge of Chakpori. "My friend," said he, "on the direct order of the Precious One, you are to be initiated as an abbot. As you have requested, you can, like Mingyar Dondap, continue to be addressed as Lama. I merely give the message of the Precious One." So, as a recognized incarnation, I had again the status with which I left the earth some 600 years before. The wheel of life had revolved full circle. Sometime later, an aged Lama came to my room and told me that now I must undergo the ceremony of the little death. "For, my son, until you have passed the gateway of death and returned, you cannot truly know that there is no death. Your studies in astral traveling have taken you far. This will take you much farther, beyond the realms of life and into the past of our country." The preparatory training was hard and prolonged. For 3 months I led a strictly supervised life. Special courses of horrible tasting herbs added an unpleasant item to my daily menu. I was adjured to keep my thoughts on that alone which is pure and holy. As if one had much choice in a lamassary. Even sampa and tea had to be taken in less quantity. Rigid austerity, strict discipline, and long, long hours of meditation. At last, after 3 months, the astrologers said that the time was now right, the portents were favorable. For 24 hours I fasted until I felt as empty as a temple drum. Then I was led down those hidden stairs and passages far below the Potala. Far down we went, flaring torches in the hands of others, nothing in mine. Down through the corridors I had traversed before. At last we reached the end of the passage. Solid rock confronted us, but a whole boulder was swung aside at our approach. Another path confronted us, a dark and narrow path with the odor of stale air, spices, and incense. Several yards farther on we were stopped momentarily by a ponderous, gold-sheathed door, which was slowly opened to the accompaniment of protesting squeaks which echoed and re-echoed as if through a vast space. Here the torches were extinguished and butter lamps lit. We moved ahead into a hidden temple carved from the solid rock by volcanic action in days long past. These corridors and passages once had led molten lava to the mouth of a belching volcano. Now puny humans trod the way and thought they were gods. But now I thought we must concentrate on the task at hand, and here was the temple of secret wisdom. 3 abbots led me in. The rest of the Lamaistic retinue had melted away in the darkness as the dissolving memories of a dream. 3 abbots, aged, desiccated with years and gladly awaiting their recall to the heavenly field. 3 old men, perhaps the greatest metaphysicians in the whole of the world, ready to give me my final ordeal of initiation. Each carried in the right hand a butter lamp, and in the left a thick stick of smouldering incense. Here the cold was intense, a strange cold, seemingly not of this earth. The silence was profound. What faint sounds there were served merely to accentuate that silence. Our felt boots made no footfalls. We might have been ghosts gliding along. From the saffron brocade robes of the abbots there came a faint rustle. To my horror, I felt tingles and shocks all over me. My hands glowed as if a fresh aura had been added. The abbots, I saw, were also glowing. The very, very dry air and the friction of our robes had generated a static electric charge. An abbot passed me a short gold rod and whispered, "Hold this in your left hand and draw it along the wall as you walk, and the discomfort will cease." I did, and with the first release of stored electricity nearly jumped out of my boots. After that it was painless. One by one, butter lamps flickered into life, lit by unseen hands. As the wavering yellow light increased, I saw gigantic figures covered in gold, and some half buried in uncut gems. A Buddha loomed out of the gloom, so huge that the light did not reach beyond the waist. Other forms were dimly seen, the images of devils, the representations of lust, and the forms of the trials which men had to undergo before the realization of self. We approached a wall on which was painted a 15-foot wheel of life. In the flickering light, it appeared to revolve and made the senses reel with it. On we went until I was sure we would crash into the rock. The leading abbot vanished. What I had imagined to be a dark shadow was a well-concealed door. This gave entrance to a path going down and down, a narrow, steep, winding path where the faint glow of the abbot's butter lamps merely seemed to intensify the dark. We felt our way haltingly, stumbling, sometimes sliding. The air was heavy and oppressive, and it felt as if the whole weight of the earth above was pressing down on us. I felt as if we were penetrating the heart of the world. A final bend in the tortuous passage, and a cavern opened up to our view. A cavern of rock glittering with gold, veins of it, lumps of it, a layer of rock, a layer of gold, a layer of rock, and so it went on. High, very high above us, gold glinted like stars in a dark night sky, as sharp specks of it caught and reflected back the faint light of the lamps. In the center of the cavern was a shining black house, a house as if made of polished ebony. Strange symbols ran along its sides, and diagrams like those I had seen on the walls of the lake tunnel. We walked to the house and entered the wide, high door. Inside were 3 black stone coffins, curiously engraved and marked. There was no lid. I peered inside, and at the sight of the contents caught my breath and felt suddenly faint. "My son," exclaimed the leading abbot, "look upon these. They were gods in our land in the days before the mountains came. They walked our country when seas washed our shores, and when different stars were in the sky. Look, for none but initiates have seen these." I looked again, fascinated and awed. 3 gold figures, nude, lay before us. 2 male and 1 female. Every line, every mark faithfully reproduced by the gold. But the size! The female was quite 10 feet long as she lay, and the larger of the 2 males was not under 15 feet. Their heads were large and somewhat conical at the top. The jaws were narrow, with a small, thin-lipped mouth. The nose was long and thin, while the eyes were straight and deeply recessed. No dead figures these, they looked asleep. We moved quietly and spoke softly, as if afraid they would awaken. I saw a coffin lid to one side. On it was engraved a map of the heavens, but how very strange the stars appeared. My studies in astrology had made me quite familiar with the heavens at night, but this was very, very different. The senior abbot turned to me and said, "You are about to become an initiate, to see the past and to know the future. The strain will be very great. Many die of it, and many fail, but none leave here alive unless they pass. Are you prepared and willing?" I replied that I was. They led me to a stone slab lying between 2 coffins. Here, at their instruction, I sat in the lotus attitude, with my legs folded, my spine erect, and the palms of my hands facing up. 4 sticks of incense were lighted, 1 for each coffin and 1 for my slab. The abbots each took a butter lamp and filed out. With the heavy black door shut, I was alone with the bodies of the age-old dead. Time passed as I meditated upon my stone slab. The butter lamp which I had carried sputtered and went out. For a few moments its wick smoldered red, and there was the odor of burning cloth. Then even that faded and was gone. I lay back on my slab and did the special breathing which I had been taught throughout the years. The silence and the dark were oppressive. Truly, it was the silence of the grave. Quite suddenly, my body became rigid, cataleptic. My limbs became numb and icy cold. I had the sensation that I was dying in that ancient tomb more than 400 feet below the sunshine. A violent, shuddering jerk within me, and the inaudible impression of a strange rustling and creaking as of old leather being unfolded. Gradually, the tomb became suffused by a pale blue light, like moonlight on a high mountain pass. I felt a swaying, a rising and a falling. For a moment I could imagine that I was once more in a kite, tossing and jouncing at the end of the rope. Awareness dawned that I was floating above my flesh body. With awareness came movement. Like a puff of smoke, I drifted as if on an unfelt wind. Above my head I saw a radiance like a golden bowl. From my middle depended a cord of silver blue. It pulsed with life and glowed with vitality. I looked down at my supine body, now resting like a corpse amid corpses. Little differences between my body and those of the giant figures slowly became apparent. The study was absorbing. I thought of the petty conceit of present-day mankind and wondered how the materialists would explain the presence of these immense figures. I thought, but then I became aware that something was disturbing my thoughts. It seemed that I was no longer alone. Snatches of conversation reached me, fragments of unspoken thoughts. scattered pictures began to flash across my mental vision. From far away, someone seemed to be tolling a great, deep-toned bell. Quickly it came nearer and nearer, until at last it appeared to explode in my head, and I saw droplets of colored light and flashes of unknown hues. My astral body was tossed and driven like a leaf upon a winter gale. Scurrying flecks of red-hot pain lashed across my consciousness. I felt alone, deserted, a waif in a tottering universe. Black fog descended upon me, and with it a calmness not of this world. Slowly, the utter blackness enfolding me rolled away. From somewhere came the booming of the sea and the hissing rattle of shingle under the drive of the waves. I could smell the salt-laden air and the tang of the seaweed. This was a familiar scene. I lazily turned on my back in the sun-warmed sand and gazed up at the palm trees. But part of me said, I had never seen the sea, never even heard of palm trees. From a nearby grove came the sound of laughing voices, voices that grew louder as a happy group of sun-bronzed people came into sight. Giants! All of them! I looked down and saw that I, too, was a giant. To my astral perceptions came the impressions, countless ages ago. Earth revolved nearer the sun in the opposite direction. The days were shorter and warmer. Vast civilizations arose, and men knew more than they do now. From outer space came a wandering planet and struck the earth a glancing blow. The earth was sent reeling out of its orbit and turning in the opposite direction. Winds arose and battered the waters, which, under different gravitational pulls, heaped upon the land, and there were floods, universal floods. Earthquakes shook the world. Lands sank beneath the seas, and others arose. The warm and pleasant land, which was Tibet, ceased to be a seaside resort, and shot some 12,000 feet above the sea. Around the land, mighty mountains appeared, belching out fuming lava. Far away in the highlands, rifts were torn in the surface, and vegetation and fauna of a bygone age continued to flourish. But there is too much to write in a book, and some of my astral initiation is far too sacred and private to put into print. Some time later, I felt the visions fading and becoming dark. Gradually, my consciousness, astral and physical, left me. Later, I became uncomfortably aware that I was cold, cold with lying on a stone slab in the freezing darkness of a vault. Probing fingers of thought in my brain. Yes, he has returned to us. We are coming. Minutes passed, and a faint glow approached. Butter lamps, the 3 old abbots. You have done well, my son. For 3 days you have lain here. Now you have seen, died, and lived. Stiffly, I climbed to my feet, swaying with weakness and hunger. Out from that never-to-be-forgotten chamber, and up to the cold, cold air of the other passages. I was faint with hunger and overcome with all that I had seen and experienced. I ate and drank my fill, and that night, as I lay down to sleep, I knew that soon I would have to leave Tibet and go to the strange foreign countries, as foretold. But now I can say that there were and are stranger than I would have ever imagined possible. End of chapter 17. The Third Eye by Tuesday Lobsang Rampa, read to you by BlueFriend. Chapter 18. Tibet Farewell. A few days later, as my guide and I were sitting beside the river of happiness, a man came galloping by. Idly he gazed in our direction and recognized the Lama Mingyar Dondap. Instantly, the dust at the horse's feet was aswirl with the violence of his stopping. "I have a message from the inmost one for the Lama Lobsang Rampa." From his pouch he pulled the long, familiar packet wrapped in the silk scarf of greeting. He handed it to me with a triple prostration and backed away, mounted his horse, and galloped off. Now I was much more assured. The events below the Potala had given me self-confidence. I opened the packet and read the message before passing it to my guide and friend, the Lama Mingyar Dondap. "I have to go to the inmost one at the Jewel Park in the morning. You have to go as well." "One does not normally guess at the precious protector's remarks, Lobsang, but I feel that you will shortly be leaving for China, and well, as I told you, I shall soon be returning to the heavenly fields. Let us make the most of this day, and of the scant time remaining." In the morning I trod the familiar path to the Jewel Park, down the hill, across the road, and into the main gates. The Lama Mingyar Dondap walked with me. In both our minds was the thought that this was perhaps the last time we would make this journey together. Perhaps it was reflected, too, strongly in my face, for when I saw the Dalai Lama alone, he said, "The time of parting, of taking fresh paths, is always hard and fraught with misery. Here in this pavilion I sat in meditation for hours, wondering if I would do right to stay or leave when our country was invaded. Either would cause pain to some. Your path is straight ahead, Lobsang, and it is not an easy path for anyone. Family, friends, country, all must be left behind. The path ahead contains, as you have been told, hardship, torture, misunderstanding, disbelief, all that is unpleasant. The ways of the foreigners are strange and not to be accounted for. As I told you once before, they believe only that which they can do, only that which can be tested in their rooms of science. Yet the greatest science of all, the science of the Overself, they leave untouched. That is your path, the path you chose before you came to this life. I have arranged for you to leave for China at the end of 5 days. 5 days? 5 days! I've expected 5 weeks. As my guide and I climbed up to our mountain home, no word was exchanged between us until we were again within the walls of the temple. "You will have to see your parents," Lobsang. "I will send a messenger." Parents? The Lama Mingyar Dondap had been more than a father and mother to me, and soon he would be leaving this life before I returned to Tibet in a few short years. All I would see of him then would be his gold-covered figure in the Hall of Incarnations, like an old discarded robe for which the wearer had no further use. 5 days! Busy days! From the Potala Museum, a new suit of Western clothes was brought for me to try on. Not that I was going to wear one in China. My lama robes would be more suitable there, but so that the others could see how I looked. Oh, that suit! Tight tubes of cloth that gripped my legs, so tight that I was afraid to bend. Now I knew why the Westerners could not sit in the lotus attitude. Their clothes were too tight. Certainly I thought I was ruined for life by these tight tubes. They put a white shroud on me, and around my neck they tied a thick ribbon and pulled it tight, as if they were going to strangle me. Over that they fitted a short piece of cloth with patches and holes behind it, in which they said the Westerners kept things, instead of in a robe as we did. But the worst was yet to come. They put thick and heavy gloves on my feet and pulled them tight with black strings with metal ends. The beggars who went on hands and knees around the Lingor road sometimes used gloves similar to these on their hands, but they were wise enough to use good Tibetan felt boots on their feet. I felt that I would be crippled and so would not be able to go to China. A black inverted bowl with an edge around it was put on my head, and I was told that I was dressed as a Western gentleman of leisure. It seemed to me that they would have to have leisure, as surely they could not be expected to do any work dressed up like this. On the third day I went again to my former home, alone on foot as when I first set out, but this time as a lama and as an abbot. Father and mother were at home to meet me. This time I was an honored guest. In the evening of that day I again went to Father's study and signed my name and rank in the family book. Then I set off again on foot for the lamasery which had been my home for so long. The remaining 2 days soon passed. On the evening of the last day, I again saw the Dalai Lama and made my farewells and received his blessing. My heart was heavy as I took leave of him. The next time I would see him, as we both knew, would be when he was dead. In the morning, at first light, we set out, slowly and reluctantly. Once more I was homeless, going to strange places and having to learn all over again. As we reached the high mountain pass, we turned to take a last long look at the holy city of Lhasa. From the top of the Patala, a solitary kite was flying. End of the third eye.